Welcome into Wealthy REI. Today, I'm going to give you the rundown on what I think are the 5 easiest real estate investing strategies for newer or growing investors who already have full-time gigs. I will preface this by saying that real estate is not inherently easy. It takes a lot of time, money, and personal sacrifice to make investments work, but I think these 5 investments offer the path of least resistance, so to speak, because they can be achieved even with a full-time job. I will also say that this is not a ranking of strategies, as they all will work better or worse in different market conditions. The main point here is to have these investments in your tool belt so you can deploy them if they make sense for your target market. Now, stick around to the end because the 5th one definitely isn't talked about much and can work almost anywhere. But for now, let's get right into it. So the first strategy, and probably the most versatile, is your classic house hack. This simply entails renting out a portion of your property to help offset the mortgage. This can be done very simply. Think about maybe buying a 2-bedroom condo instead of a 1-bedroom condo and renting out the room to offset the mortgage, or on larger properties by living in one unit and renting out the others. If the property is 4 units or under, you can use a residential mortgage with all the perks of first-time homebuyer subsidies, owner occupancy, FHA financing, lowest interest rates, etc. If it's over 4 units, you'll be headed for commercial financing, which can complicate things a bit. But starting out or growing, you're likely going to be in that residential range anyways, so it's not a big deal. Now, I absolutely love house hacking and have personally been doing it since 2013 when I bought my first property. The house hack strategy opened my eyes to how powerful real estate can be because it helps you eliminate or subsidize one of life's top expenses in housing. And if you free that up, it creates a snowball effect where you can then reinvest those savings into more properties, more investments, or a better lifestyle. There's just so many options. So I advocate for house hacking whenever anyone comes to me looking for advice on buying a single family or a condo. I just always suggest they consider buying a multifamily where your mortgage could be offset completely in some markets and most others still heavily subsidized, like 50%. And a lot of times this doesn't even enter people's minds, but it's such an easy wealth builder if you can do it. So I just love to kind of plant that seed when I can, and you'll hear me recommending it a lot on this channel. The next strategy, and another popular one here, is called the BRRRR Method, which means you buy, you renovate, you rent, you refinance, and you repeat the process using funds from your cash out refinance. This can be done for really any property type, from single families to 100-unit multifamily buildings. It's a tried and true method of what's called forcing equity, which means you take on renovations or other value add projects and the final product is worth way more than what you actually spent on it. Therefore, you kind of forced that equity. It's different than a flip in that you hold the property, so you're able to build a portfolio of cash flowing, appreciating assets that can build serious wealth over time. I was able to build my portfolio this exact way, and to be honest, my biggest career regret to date is that I didn't do it more when the market was better. Unfortunately, with high rates and lenders being a bit more picky about refinances, the BRRRR method is much harder to pull off these days, but it's definitely still being done and should always be considered. You just need to be a lot more selective with your properties, your markets, renovations, loan products. But if you're able to identify an opportunity, it's a great investment for a newer investor or one looking to grow because there's such a proven track record of success with it. Since the market's a lot tighter these days, investors need to get more creative finding deals. And that brings me to my next strategy, which is becoming more and more popular, and it's called upzoning. So with housing affordability being such a significant issue these days, we're starting to see areas with these historically stingy zoning policies and NIMBY attitudes start to give way to zoning changes allowing more density. And what this means for investors is that it's possible to find cities or towns with newly adapted housing policies and figure out how to maximize value before most others do. Now, a prime example of this is accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, which are starting to sweep across the country because they've been implemented in California very successfully. And what the zoning allows you to do is build a separate unit on the same lot and rent it for market rate. For every municipality, there's different rules, but most will allow you to convert like a garage or a basement into an additional unit as long as it meets safety standards, regardless of if a property is zoned for single family use. So basically you could buy a property at single family rates and convert it to multiple units, which obviously increases the value significantly. These zoning changes are widely publicized as there's often heated debates over this issue because there's a lot of people who just don't want these changes. But due to that, it's pretty easy to find when policies may be changing to allow more density. Now, personally, I have Google Alerts set up. I have like a zoning changes filter in my area, and I feel like I have a pretty good sense of what towns are leaning towards zoning changes versus which ones are kind of putting up a fight. So I would at least start there if you're looking to jump into this. In fact, upzoning was just brought up on the latest BRRRR on the Market podcast, literally a day after I wrote this piece. So this strategy, it's definitely starting to get some serious attention nationwide. If you want to check that show out, it's linked up here and also in my description. I highly recommend checking it out. It's some great info. Now, before I get into my fourth and fifth favorite strategies, I just want to take 1 minute and ask you to like this video if you're digging it so far. Now, it really helps me get exposure, and it's just a little reward for all my hard work on this. Also, I want to get as many people investing as I can. So if you're interested in any of these strategies, I'm offering one-on-one mentoring to help you identify deals, come up with a plan of action, reframe your mindset, like whatever it takes to get you on the path to real estate success. You can head to my website, linked in the description below, schedule a free 15-minute call with me to see if you'd be a good fit for the program. Okay, on to number 4, and this strategy is something you're most likely familiar with, short-term rentals. Now this is one near and dear to my heart, as my wife and I have done over 1 million in Airbnb bookings with a 4.86 out of 5-star overall rating across all of our properties. Now, the increased earnings from renting our places short-term was so great that my wife was able to quit her corporate role and manage the Airbnbs full-time. Needless to say, this is a strategy that's worked extremely well for us and plenty of other investors in the last 5 or so years. However, I will say that I have a love-hate relationship with short-term rentals because, as the saying goes, mo money, mo problems. When you run these, you're essentially in the travel industry. So you're caught up doing a lot more like customer service oriented tasks and managing cleaners. You also open yourself up to a lot of rental volatility due to seasonality and general travel trends. So it's pretty hard to forecast revenue. Now, I could elaborate a lot more on this topic, but I actually already did in a full video, which I have linked in the description, or you can see it here. Regardless of the downsides, of which there are many, when done right, short-term rentals still offer investors an easy entry into real estate investing because if you find the right property with the right amenities, your returns could easily be like 3 to 5x what long-term rates would be. But before you jump into this, I'd highly recommend you go through my short-term rental playlist on my channel because there's a ton of good advice to consider before making that leap. And finally, my last strategy is called the live-in flip. Now this is where you buy a traditional single-family house that you renovate while living in it. Now the thought of living in a construction zone may turn you off, and I'm not gonna lie, this strategy requires some personal sacrifice, but there are ways you can make it less painful. So typically lenders give owner occupants a 60-day grace period before you need to take occupancy. So you can try to schedule any major projects for that time, or at least try to make a portion of the house livable so you can have work done on the rest while you're there. After the house is renovated, you're going to have forced a good amount of equity, just like we talked about with the BRRRRs. But in this case, after you hold it for 2 years, you can sell the house and not be taxed on any gains under $500,000 if you're married, or $250,000 if you're single. For most single family houses, this will completely exempt your gains and you can then reinvest this money into another project, buy a nicer house, maybe you can buy a multifamily and house hack. It can give you a sizable chunk of money that can really change your investing trajectory. In a world where almost everything is taxed, this is a nice little loophole that could save you up to $150,000 if you maxed out your exemptions, assuming a 30% tax rate. These are the main investing strategies you'll hear me preach on this channel. Not to disparage other strategies like flipping, wholesaling, developing, etc., but most of those really require you to be full-time to be successful, and for smaller investors, that's just not attainable. If you're able to get some good value out of this segment, I'd recommend you check out my full real estate playlist here. Thanks for watching and hope to see you next video.